All right, Nick, let's talk about the South Carolina Gamecocks. This is a team that has been on fire lately. There's a lot of good mojo going around South Carolina. I think they ended last season very, very hot, and I hope that they can transfer that momentum into this season. But we have some interesting comments from quarterback Spencer Rattler on how he thinks that they will do just that.
Yeah, Miles, I think this is an outstanding update coming from Rattler, kind of highlighting where he is and also where the Gamecock program is as well. But before we get into that news, South Carolina fans, look, on an interesting question for you guys to answer, as always, in the comment section below. Who is the fastest Carolina Gamecock in program history? A lot of great names here on this list. I got a few guys in my mind, but I'm curious what you guys have to say. So make sure in the comment section below you put the fastest South Carolina Gamecock in team history. But all right, Miles, what you got? What's the latest news out of Columbia?
Yeah, Nick, there are a lot of fast Gamecocks. Two guys come to my mind. Recent guys, Demir Bird, Pharaoh Cooper. Both guys are pretty quick. So I think there's a lot of great answers that we're going to see. But I want to talk about the Gamecocks. I want to talk about Spencer Rattler first. And let's talk about his interesting end to last season. I think he really caught fire the last 3 games of this season. We see when the first one was against Tennessee, probably his best game of his career.
Sure.
430 of 37, 438 yards, 81.1% completion percentage, 6 touchdowns, no interceptions. Absolutely phenomenal. It was truly probably the greatest performance I have seen in a long time from a South Carolina quarterback. Then they also go on to beat Clemson, 360 yards, 2 touchdowns there. And he can, after losing a lot of weapons to the transfer portal, they go to the bowl game against Notre Dame. They're not able to pull out the win, but still he has a strong performance without 2 of his key weapons there. But they go 246 yards, 2 touchdowns there. So I think it was a really good end to last season. And now I want to go into the article and talk about Rattler because I think we can see here something is brewing in South Carolina. And I just wanted to add those notes in before we get into the article. This is from ESPN, Nick, and it says, as Rattler enters his senior year at South Carolina and second overall at the school, he reflected on his jagged journey and predicted the struggles are going to help him thrive in the long term. He says, I see it as a blessing. God has me going through this for a reason, and that is how I look at it truly. And there can't be success without adversity. So being able to go through that adversity and come out on the other end is a great feeling. He goes on to say South Carolina's offensive coordinator, Marcus Satterfield, left for Nebraska's offensive coordinator job, but the Gamecocks hired veteran NFL coach Dowell Loganes, I believe that's how you say his name, via Arkansas, who brings more of a decade of experience as both an NFL offensive coordinator and a quarterback coach. Rattler says Loganes has been awesome to work with and pointed to a spring focused on more explosive plays. South Carolina lacked consistency on offense last year as the only touchdown against Florida came against a fake punt and the offense mustered just 1 touchdown against Missouri. He said, I felt like we left something on the table last year, Rattler said, and toward the end of the season, November on, we scratched the surface and showed what we can do. So Nick, as we highlighted earlier, the games at the end of the season, that was just scratching the surface for Rattler and what he thinks this new office can bring. He talks about more explosive play potential. I think this is going to be really interesting because even at the last games of the season as well, he threw touchdowns of 60 and 72 yards, so he had a lot more explosion there, but that is just scratching the surface. So that is very exciting as a South Carolina fan to hear just how much more dynamic this offense could be this season. But Nick, I'm excited. What do you think about the Gamecocks? What do you think about Spencer Rattler and all of these comments that he's made?
So I'll tell you what I really love about it. Self-awareness, right? You look at a guy in Spencer Rattler who's gone through some ups and some downs in his college career as a quarterback. Obviously got an early start at Oklahoma, eventually got benched in favor of Caleb Williams, transferred to Carolina, had some lumps early last season with the Gamecocks, finished strong like you alluded to. This is a guy who's been around the block. He's mature. He's grown up. He's fought through a lot of adversity, and he's self-aware. That's what I love in a leader. That's what I love in a quarterback. He understands that we can't just focus on what we did the last few games and just of the regular season and the bowl game last season and say, look, oh, that'll easily just propagate into this next, the 2023 campaign. They have to understand that there were a lot of games last year. We went to the A&M game, frankly. That was an ugly offensive performance by the Gamecocks. They ended up pulling out the victory, but it was an ugly performance. You brought up the Missouri and Florida game as well. This is a team where if they need to take the next step, if they want to take that next step, they need offensive consistency. And the guy to lead that is, of course, Rattler. And the only way you get there, Miles, it really is this simple sometimes, is if you have a trigger man, the quarterback position, a guy who understands that and is willing to recognize that and put the burden on himself to execute at that level. Because until you recognize there's a problem, you can't solve it. And that's exactly what Rattler's alluding to here. He recognizes they need to be more consistent, and it's on him to solve it. I think that's a great sign for this Gamecock program. And look, it's one of those things. If they can build a lot of offensive power consistently, that will do wonders in the recruiting game. Look, because we know the Gamecocks are going to be good next season, relatively speaking. We know the SEC is becoming a super conference. Oklahoma and Texas are coming. Georgia's not going anywhere. I think Florida under Napier will get back to being at least somewhat decent. The Volunteers are pretty good under Heupel. This is going to be a brutal SEC. The Gamecocks are going to have to recruit at an incredibly high level. The way to get that started is to have an explosive offensive campaign in 2023. That's a lot on Spencer Rattler's shoulders. He won't see the results of long-term success in terms of Carolina, but if he can turn this offensive consistency around and get them playing at a high level, they'll bring in much better recruits, and they'll be competing with the Volunteers. They'll be competing with the Georgias. They'll be competing with the Floridas, and they'll have a chance to be better than potentially they've been even in the Spurrier days. That's a lot on Spencer Rattler's shoulders, but the fact that this kid is showing the self-awareness to recognize that the problems were on him partially last season and he's working to correct it is a great sign for this program.